people will associate you. They will make assumptions based off of where they see you and what situations they see you in. There's 2 corridors in that main interior building, one with the deputy assistant secretaries and one with the assistant secretaries. And what did I do? I found people on those corridors to talk to. Why? Because every time I walked down that corridor to talk to someone, I was being seen by all those executive leaders. And now I'm doing this weekly, and they keep seeing me. So now they begin to make the assumption and they believe that, oh shoot, Alex must have something of value. He must have something to add because he's always here where leadership is, where power is, where influence is. So look, Alex, hey, do you mind stepping here? I'd love to hear your ideas on this.
Why did I become an executive coach? I saw lots of great people fail to get ahead at work, while their much less talented peers blew right past them. That made me furious, but also curious. What were great people getting wrong? It came down to helping them re-examine what drove success, and then helping them make critical shifts, one hard truth at a time.
Feel like you're doing everything you were told, but you're not moving ahead at work nor having the impact you seek? Then welcome to 97% Effective with Michael Winderoth, where we skip feel-good, happy talk and engage experts in pointed conversations about what it really takes to move the needle at work and your career. So if you feel stalled or frustrated, or seek that extra edge as you move to the next level, then look no further. This is the Hard Truths Playbook you never got.
I'm Michael Winderoth, and you're listening to 97% Effective. People will forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Memorable words from the poet Maya Angelou. How do you make people never forget you and use that to propel your career and your impact on others? For the answer, look no further than my guest today. I'm extremely excited. Alex D. Tremble. Alex is an award-winning speaker, consultant, author, and coach that helps ambitious leaders build stronger, more strategic relationships. At 24, he rose to oversee organizational development in the U.S. government Department of the Interior, and then became the youngest federal employee to create and run 3 federal government-wide senior leadership development programs. Today, we're going to unpack those critical skills that propelled his own rise and how he teaches those lessons to others, which he now does through his own leadership development company, GPS Leadership Solutions. Glad to catch Alex on the rise. He was recently named a fellow of the Aspen Institute and a 40 under 40 honoree with the Leadership Center for Excellence. Alex, welcome to 97% Effective.
You make me sound good. Like I got a little impressed for a second. Thanks for the introduction.
I wanted to break this into 2 pieces. First, to talk about your personal story, because not everyone rises as fast as you do, particularly within the federal government. So there is a story there of how you did that. And I think they're very powerful strategies, very much linked to the book that I wrote about get promoted. And then to dive into how you've taken this and you train and work with other leaders. So there's those 2 pieces. And we'll start with the personal. 24, becoming appointed to oversee organizational development, and then continuing to move up. And I think what makes that more remarkable is within the federal government, where a lot of the promotions are about seniority, time and seat. And so can you share a few of the drivers or specifics that fueled your early rise?
I like hard things. Like even when I played football, my background was I used to be a college football player and high school football player and got all these awards and whatnot. People ask me, "Hey, why do you love football?" I'm like, football's okay. Like it's cool. But what's really interesting to me is there any way that I can figure out that person who's playing right in front of me? If I can figure out their calls, if I can understand how they're going to be operating by the how they move and what the words they say. If I can understand it by the end of the game, like it's just a great challenge, right? So it's the same thing when it comes to the workplace. For me, it was, well, how do I put myself in situations that are challenging? How do I put myself in a situation where I'm going to have to figure out how to maneuver in order to be successful? And to your point earlier, I absolutely did this early in my career, and it made no sense that they allowed some 23, 24-year-old kid to do this. But I think it comes back to being willing to put myself in difficult situations, being willing to ask for the opportunity. People tend to think that it's so hard to get people to help you. But I think one of the biggest challenges is not people helping you, is you willing to ask for help, you being willing to ask for an opportunity, putting yourself out there. Because if you don't ask, there's like 100% chance that you're not going to get what you want.
I saw a video, I think it was on your YouTube channel that you left. And I would draw an interesting distinction that you made here, because you said it is about asking. A lot of people don't ask. And if you don't ask, there's no way anything's going to happen. But you also, in that video, said that a lot of people just ask and they want to be helped.
Yeah.
I imagine that this is not just, come help me, right? Tell me what to do. There is some other things that you did clearly that helped.
Asking is one important piece, but it's one piece of the puzzle. And like you, I've worked almost my entire career working around people who are extremely successful, whether it's in the government, the private sector, nonprofit, people who are, millionaires and billionaires I've been around. And the one thing I learned from them is that they really talk about challenges. For some reason, people, in general, they think that, okay, these super rich and super successful people are just sitting around the table like, my dad bought this for me. My uncle bought this, or this is so easy. That is not what happens. They're always talking about how difficult things were and how they found a way to overcome. And what I realized for me earlier on is that if you sit back waiting for something to happen to you, you're not going to look impressive to those people. What they've always been impressed with me is because I'm always sitting here trying to do something new, trying to write a new book, trying to create a new program, trying to reach out and build a new business. I'm always doing something. I'm always working on something. So when they look at me and when they talk to me, they believe, they know, Alex isn't just about talk. He's willing to put his own skin in the game. He's working before he even has the assistance. So if he gets the assistance, what's telling what he can accomplish, right? So you have to be willing to put the work in on the front end. You have to be willing to take the risk to try something new, to talk to someone, to throw an idea out there and try to make it work. Because at the end of the day, you only win. If you put an idea out there, if you try something and you're successful, you look pretty freaking impressive. If you put something out there and you aren't successful, you know what? Now you have a great story to tell someone when you have reached success, because you will, if you keep doing that, something will eventually go through. And you can talk about how the challenges that you ran into, but you found the grit, the resiliency, the strategic know-how to overcome it and still be successful. And you learned. So thank you so much for calling it out, Michael. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and so you were doing this, and then you made these asks, and there's this piece that we both talk about around networking, right? Which a lot of people think is go out and talk to everyone, and it's not. We're going to get into this being strategic about it. This is a centerpiece of what you do, but I think the example here of the way that you strategically networked within the federal government, taking advantage of that position that you earned, but then you ratcheted that to kind of bring in things. And can you just share how you kind of went around that networking and talking to a lot of mentors? Because I think that is really a very savvy thing you did, but incredibly helpful in how that kind of multiplied and I think further fueled your ascent. Just sharing a little bit about that.
I can't take credit for everything, right? So much was given to me and shown to me by mentors and other executives I was just around. But in saying that, I'm now giving your audience advice. You need to be around people who can give you great advice, right? You need to be around people who can mentor you. If you're around the same people who are in the same exact position you're in, they can only tell you about what you probably already know or being exposed to, right? You need to be around people who have done better than you, who have achieved greater things, who've had huge successes and huge failures. You need to be around those people. But one thing that I think really led to me understanding how to build those relationships strategically is one of my mentors back in the day. And what he did intentionally was he would bring me to every single senior executive meeting he could. I wouldn't speak. I wasn't participating. I was just sitting in the room, just sitting in the room. Why? Because he wanted people to know who I was. He wanted me to be synonymous with executive leadership, right? I didn't have to say anything, but what we've learned, again, and Michael, you and I know this, people will associate you. They will make assumptions based off of where they see you and what situations they see you in. So by me being in executive rooms all the time, I began to be seen as someone who must have value to bring. And then on top of that, what I started to do was there's a corridor. There's two corridors in that main interior building, one with the deputy assistant secretaries and one with the assistant secretaries. And what did I do? I found people on those corridors to talk to. Why? Because every time I walked down that corridor to talk to someone, I was being seen by all those executive leaders. And now I'm doing this weekly, and they keep seeing me. So now they begin to make the assumption and they believe that, oh, shoot, Alex must have something of value. He must have something to add because he's always here where leadership is, where power is, where influence is. So look, Alex, hey, do you mind stepping here? I'd love to hear your ideas on this. I started being brought into meetings with ridiculous leaders, with again, assistant secretaries and whatnot. Like it was so profound. And the last thing I'll share in this is, you need to also know how to shut your mouth. See, when you're working with those super senior and super successful leaders, they tend to be a little bit skittish sometimes because they can't always trust that someone is not trying to set them up or trying to get information out to them to undermine them, to take their position. If you can be that person that they can talk to and they know you're not going to share anything, you begin to become a confidant. They begin to go to you because they know they can share, you know what, this employee over here is really annoying me. I'm not sure how they do. And you don't have to have an answer. You just have to have an opportunity, just a place for them to vent to. And they will start to respect and value so much more because you're providing a service that they can't get anywhere else and feel safe doing it. Again, there's so many different strategies, but you know.
Yeah, and you share a lot of these, and we won't have time to go into them all. But I'm sure most people who are listening immediately, will say, Alex has an amazing personality. He creates this warmth right away. You kind of connect with him. But I've got to ask, right? You probably reached out for mentorship to different people. Maybe you're batting a 1,000, or maybe you're not. And some people say no. I mean, was there a key to building certain relationships, and that one in particular that worked for you? I would dare say, we can split words here. Mm-hmm. that really was like a sponsorship. He, or it might have been he, took you under his wing, made you see those things, probably was also talking about you and wanted to lift you up. So the question here is, are there specific ways that, you do better seeking mentors, and how do you convert them into sponsors like you did?
When you're talking about mentorships, what you're talking about is networking with someone, is building a relationship. So when I talk about in the book, Reaching Senior Leadership, is how to specifically network. But this is funny. This is weird. I never asked my wife to be my girlfriend. I have no idea if that's a new thing or if that's a weird thing or not. We just kept hanging out more and more and more, and then it was almost like assumed. And then one day I asked her to marry me, and we got married. I've never asked her to be my girlfriend. And I'll say the same thing about my mentors. I never asked my mentors to be my mentors. I never asked them, hey, can you mentor me? Because I don't necessarily need their approval for them to mentor me. I can be mentored by someone I'm just watching, right? I can be mentored by someone who I just ask a question to every once in a while. See, the challenges with mentoring is that when you use the word mentoring, it has weight to it. People start to get a little nervous. Why? Because they feel like now your career, they're responsible for your career, your successes, your failures. They get a little nervous and they start to think about all the time commitments and do I have the time and energy to really do that? When really all you need to do is talk to them every couple of weeks, right? And so what I've done now is I just don't ask people to be my mentors. I always reach out to someone. Hey, do you mind if I have 15 minutes of your time? Thank you so much. Ask some really great questions. Appreciate everything they've shared with me. I do my homework. I just make sure we have a really engaging conversation. And at the end of that conversation, I religiously, hey, you know what? If I have another question, do you mind if I reach out to you in a month or two just to check back in? And they almost always say, absolutely, absolutely. And now I got them in my clutches. Because you just keep reaching out to them and you build that relationship.
Yeah.
And then at some point, they're going to say, hey, I want to introduce you to Alex. He's my mentee. And I never even asked him to be my mentor. It's like magic.
Yeah. So there's that magic there, but it's a very strategic, deliberate, and thoughtful way that you go about it. Also, I mentioned your podcast before, Executive Appeal, and many of those mentors have come and been your guests on the show. And in a way, this has also kind of shined the light on them, their ideas. What have you kind of most learned from that podcast? You're well into it, many episodes. Anything in particular?
It's hard to call out one thing because I've learned so much. The podcast, The Executive Appeal, started off as a way for me to communicate to the world and provide opportunity for everyone to have access to mentors who have great advice. We talked about it before. Got to be around people who have great advice, who have experienced successes and failures, right? And I realized that most people don't have that. So that's why I created the show. And so it started off with mentors, started off with focus on the federal government, but it became so much bigger than that. And we focus now on specifically teaching those skills to navigate one's career to people who want to be a senior level leader or an executive within an organization, especially people of color. And so for me, what I've learned is just one thing I've learned is that you can't be afraid of failure and you have to be willing to call out when you are afraid. I had a conversation near the beginning of when the podcast came out about fear. The thing about fear, why it's so scary, is that you may not even know sometimes that you're afraid, right? I have been being told by my mentors and leaders around me to start my own business and go out and grow for a long time. They kept challenging me, Alex, you got to do this, you got to do this. And I kept saying, no, I don't want to. I want to stay in the federal government right now because, I want to do some really good work for the American people. But after this episode, I sat back and I looked at my life and I realized that I absolutely do love doing work for the American people and for the world. I absolutely love it. But that wasn't the reason why I wasn't going to build my business. It was because I was afraid, right? I had so much fear, but I didn't know I was afraid. I was afraid of what if I fail? What if I'm not successful? On the other side, what if I am successful? Will I be able to handle all of it? Like there's so many questions that come out that we just say, you know what? I should just stay here because here is really good when you're really afraid. So I would encourage your audience to, if they're not where they think they want to be, take a look at their life and ask yourself the question, are you here because you truly want to be here? Or are you here because you're worried about what would happen if you take a step forward or to the side somewhere?
Yeah. What got you to take that step?
What got me to take that step is actually, I was in a training a few years back. I was in a training and I was in and out the training the entire time because I was also serving as chief of staff at this large organization. And I just had a lot of things on my plate. I got to make sure everyone's taken care of. And at the end of the training, it was a week-long training, we were wrapping up. And all of the guests said, all the other participants were like, hey, Alex, you should be teaching this class. I was like, what? No, I'm busy. No, Alex, seriously, you should be teaching. And everyone started chiming in because every time I was there and I was providing thoughts and value, everyone loved it. And then the trainers actually pulled me aside afterwards and said, look, we'd like to hire you to start doing coaching for our executive leadership program. And I was like, are you sure? Like, yeah, sure. We want to hire you, please. And that is what pushed me out of that comfort zone into doing more and greater things.
Yeah, well, I can see why they would say that. and just one last question, kind of wrap up on the personal, because your podcast is excellent. And I do want to ask you this question because, when we talk to leaders, and I think you and I may have discussed this in the past, a lot of leaders will tell you things about how they rose or how they would like things to be, just work hard, whatever that, conventional wisdom may be. You are good at asking questions. So how do you get at what did they really do versus what are they just saying because it sounds good and it's beefing up their reputation now? And I'm particularly asking you because you're very good at the networking and building that. I mean, you also hold a master's, right, in sociology and psychology and industrial organizational studies.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you kind of sort through what's really true and got them there versus where they may just be telling tales?
My initial response to that is I learned over trial and error that there are two types of leaders out there, the ones who are successful, right? They're the people who are very mindful and very cognizant of what they have done to be successful. And they'll say, hey, look, I know that there's 1,000+ people who are better at me and more ready for this position than I am, but I got here because I knew this person or because I could do this, right? They are very aware of the value they provide and how they navigate, right? The other type of leader are liars.
Okay.
But there are liars who are intentionally lying. I think there's far fewer more of them, but I think there's a lot of liars who just simply truly believe, oh, I just worked hard. I didn't think about my career at all. I just worked hard and eventually I made it here. And it's complete BS. When you start asking the question like, okay, well, how did you actually get this job? Oh, well, I worked with this person. Oh, so what you're doing is you build a relationship with this influencer over here. He's like, oh, yeah, right. Okay. And then you talk to him more about it. Like, okay, so how did you do this? Oh, well, I wrote these papers and then people caught up on my name. Oh, so you were very intentional with building your reputation by putting information out there, right? Oh, yeah, exactly. So I love the question you asked because for the audience, it's so easy because again, I got these answers as well. Hey, how do I reach senior leadership? And so many of them said, oh, just work hard. Don't worry about your career. That stuff that'll slow you down. It's BS. You have to be willing to take the questions more in depth. But I would say that's hard. It's if you haven't done and you don't have the background to ask these really, really good questions from the jump. If you don't have the background in this, it's hard to really pull that content out. And that's why, seriously, and I'm being real talk, this is why you should listen to The Executive Pill. This is why you should be listening to this podcast. This is why you should be reading Michael's book and my book, because that's exactly what we did. Like our job is to curate that information, to curate those points of advice and mentorship and provide it to you in a clear, easy to understand form. That is what we do versus you having to hit your head against the wall because you're trying to figure out what the right question to ask is.
You've been listening to 97% Effective with your host, Executive Coach Michael Wenderoth. If this interview is making you think, make sure to share it with a friend. Now, back to our interview.
So if we summarize also your rise, I mean, I heard 3 themes there. I mean, you were super proactive and you tried stuff. You really were proactive. 2, you had mentors, but in particular that one who took you around. And then a lot of time in that corridor, bringing value to people.
A lot of time in that corridor, bringing value to people. I would tell everyone listening to this, if you want to be successful, there's a saying, there's a story about, flying closer to the sun, bigger chance of being burnt. So what I would encourage everyone, if you want to rise, I'm going to use this phrase, I'm going to use this word. I know you're not going to like it, but you have to understand political savvy. You have to understand what people's motivations are and what their values are and what their desires are. Because if yours run counter to theirs, they may come after you. And that is just a reality. Don't get mad. Don't get upset. Just realize that you have to be cognizant of this. And if you are cognizant enough to understand the playing field around you, who wants what, from where, when they want it, if you can understand that, then you can find ways to provide those things to them. And now you're building allies instead of enemies.
Yeah. And let's shift now into the work you do. I mean, we have talked about this and you addressed, your introduction video, you say you've been lied to, and that presumably is referring to it's just your hard work, right? There's this other political savvy element, or do you want to add anything to that? Because it is a bold statement you make up there. You've been lied to. Does grab your attention.
Because it's true. I think I'll make a very quick statement on this. I think that you have been lied to, but I think we've been lied to in so many ways. So what you got to realize is that just because someone's doing something for your best interest doesn't mean it's in your best interest, right? I think our society teaches us so many things about who we should value, and everyone is the same, and they all require the same amount of our time. No, it's BS. I have a wife. If I don't prioritize time with my wife over some random person, I won't have a wife. The reality is that if we believe these lies that society tells us that, oh, YOLO, you only live once, so you don't work too hard. They're not paying you for that. Well, yeah, sure, but who's the person who stands out? The person who does something extra. The person who's not ordinary is extraordinary. They become extraordinary by doing extra. And you find ways to put yourself out there to make yourself more appealing. That allows you to have the resources to travel the world. It allows you to have the resources to do those things for your family that you say you want to do. Last thing I'll say is one of my good friends, I was asking him what is his goal, because he does very well. And he's a consultant in the medical field. And I said, what's your goal? He said, Alex, the last few years, my goals have changed in regards to finance. He said, for me, what I now tell all kids that I speak to, I aspire to be a full-time parent. I aspire to be a full-time parent. And the only way to do that is for me to make enough money, because money pays the bills, money pays for school, money pays for the roof, money pays all it. I have to make enough money so that I don't have to work. Right? And that's for me is the game. You can do whatever you want to do. Absolutely. Be happy, whatever it is. But if you want to live a life where money is not a problem, you got to have money. Because when you don't have money, what are you thinking about? Money. The reality is that everyone has problems. If you're poor, you have problems. If you're rich, you have problems. What problems do you want? I'd rather rich problems. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love how you just call some of these things out, and you talk about this, right, on your videos, and you share a lot of very compelling, snippets that gets people to think. Let's talk about your business, helping leaders, GPS solutions, and the focus, or it sounds like it may have broadened now. What, historically early on was helping leaders in the federal government rise. It sounds like you've expanded beyond that. But I'd love for you to share, because we think about government, most of us think about bureaucracy. Are there some kind of unique things from that space that either you've learned or we can benefit from those insights kind of more broadly?
I think absolutely. And I'm going to say this, and I love to hear back from your audience. And you can put in the comment section or write. The government is probably one of the hardest places to work in, most difficult places to work in. If you want to learn how to successfully build relationships to get something done, go to the government. Why? Because we in the government, we don't have one client. We serve everyone. So one of the reasons why I did start off working with the federal government is because federal employees have it hard. And on top of having it really hard, who is the punching bag every 4 years that everyone talks about? How lazy the federal government employees are. And let me tell you, I worked in the federal government for 11 years. I don't know too many lazy people. But the challenge is for government employees is that, real talk, they're not allowed to speak up. The government is not allowed to run commercials. You'll never see a Department of Interior commercial. You'll never see an EPA commercial. You'll see Walmart commercials, right? You'll see all these other types of organizations having their commercials trying to get their message out. We are not allowed to do that. Sorry, I'm not longer a federal employee, but they're not allowed to do that. And so when politicians and local people who have no idea what the agency is actually doing to save their life or save them money or to make sure that the food they consume is edible, and you're talking about them, it hurts. And so that's why I started off there. But what I found with the executive pill is that so many people across the spectrum, government, nonprofit, and private sector, so many people wanted to achieve more in their careers, but they were stunted. They were being stunted because of so many political things that they just didn't realize, the lack of relationships and so on and so forth. And that's why I do the work I do, specifically focus on helping organizations build the culture and shape the culture required to attract, to retain and develop the leaders that are going to be needed to help them reach their missions.
This part around political savvy, which it seems like you need to have to particularly navigate a more bureaucratic environment like you're describing. Many of the things you do, or you had mentioned, have visibility, kind of almost stick your neck out a little bit. Feels like it wouldn't necessarily get rewarded in the government. And, also this political savvy part, there's the other side of it. And I would love for you to have to talk about this, because I see this a lot in the private sector, is people are worried about kind of taking things out there, right? Because if they take it out there, they're worried about, it's going to get stolen, or I share it with a mentor or this person and they take my idea, they take the credit for it, or even a peer. How do you prevent that from happening? You at the one hand want to be bold and build relationships, but how do you make sure you don't get taken advantage of?
Look, again, you and I both work with a lot of people from underrepresented communities. And one of the things that I was taught growing up is never let your left hand know what your right hand's doing, right? So what we were taught is you don't tell anyone what you're doing because they may try to undermine you, right? They may try to steal your idea. There's all these negative things. So what you should do is you keep it to yourself and you keep working on it. What I have found in my career, at least, and the people in the organizations I work with, that doesn't work. What I do intentionally is I share my ideas with as many people as possible. Why? Because when I share my ideas, now they have the ability to help me. I can't expect someone to help me if they don't know what I need help with, right? And the reality is, now again, I'm gonna use that L word again. And a lot of people who would do you harm are too lazy to take your idea and actually implement it. So yes, there are absolutely if you came up with the next idea for the next Facebook or something like that, maybe you want to keep your circle relatively closer, right? That's the reality. But in order to develop Facebook, you would have to invite some people and you'd have to tell someone about what you're doing. And so what I would tell people is to really, at the beginning, don't worry about who may steal your idea, because most ideas take energy to implement. And most people are not willing to do what it takes to actually implement the idea, even if they do love it. I'm a proponent for sharing what your goals are and aspirations are, because now you're giving people a way to help you reach those goals and aspirations. And as all of us know, I know Michael's always talking about it as well, no one can achieve anything of significance by themselves, period. Point blank, period. You need other people. And the way you do that is by having a compelling story. But when you tell those stories, it's only inspiring if it's new, it's innovative, it's hard. And that's how you get people to come along with you. Say, you know what? That's awesome. I want to help you do this. Instead of just keeping it to yourself and saying, one day, maybe I'll possibly get this done.
You mentioned at the beginning, and you just mentioned a minute ago, underrepresented groups. And so people of color, women, those who may be minorities within a majority situation, we can talk about that in the States. I work with people globally where those groups look different. But let's not shy away from the subject. I mean, are there specific considerations or strategies that those groups need to take into account or do differently? What's your views on this?
When I say something different, I mean, do what works. If you see something working, you should do it, or at least try, right? Okay, so I'm gonna use an example. So if we know, which we do, there's research study after research study after research study that says 80% of jobs are filled via relationships. That is networking. 80% of jobs are filled via networking. Then maybe you should be focusing on networking, right? If there's science that tells us to use certain words versus other certain words, then maybe you should try that out. Again, this is what me and Michael talk about. A great example. When you're trying to build trust and relationship with someone new, what we found is that if you use the word advice, hey, I love your advice. Can you give me some advice on this? Why does that work? Well, because people generally feel good when someone asks for their advice. It means, oh, I feel valued. They think I'm important. They think I have something to add. Here's my advice. And you know what? Because I give you my advice, I must like you. So let me see if I can help you out again. Wonderful. At the same time, if that person doesn't like you, what can you ask them that's very similar? For their opinion. I don't have to like you at all to give you my opinion. But the benefit is that you still get possibly some really good ideas. And then if that works, you can go back to that person and say, hey, thank you so much for that great advice that you provided me. And now they begin to say, oh, wow, I gave them advice. So I guess I must like them to some extent. And if things go wrong, then they can't say anything because it was their idea. So there's a lot of research out there on what works and what doesn't work. But we have to be willing to change our mindset about what it takes to be successful. If you believe that stupid saying to pick yourself up by your bootstraps, it just doesn't exist. You can try. Yes, you absolutely should be working to do everything you possibly can to help yourself be successful. But we know there's data out there that tells us that most successful people have friends and colleagues who are in a higher economic community than you. Harvard just produced a study saying they found that people from lower socioeconomic groups do much better in life when they have friends who are in a higher socioeconomic group. Now, we already knew this, but now Harvard has actual research saying that it's important if we want to advance in our quote unquote status, we need to connect with and be friends with and befriend people who are in higher socioeconomic status than us and higher positions and more positions of authority and so on and so forth.
And as we talk about heeding the evidence and giving, I like what you said, give that a try. You've also a video you talked about before is to find what works for you. And the only way you find what works for you is by doing it. And then you kind of iterate into it. I think this was one that you left, you talked about your own public speaking, that evolution, how you became such a good speaker. I do want to ask this comment that I saw that from a senior exec, must have been one of your mentors, praising one of your previous books. And she wrote, I love how he talks about how to leverage discrimination as career fuel. And that was only a comment there. So could you share what she was referring to or what that chapter was about?
Yeah, the chapter in the book, Reaching Senior Leadership, is the story of a extremely senior level executive within the federal government and how she was able to maneuver her career in the extreme levels of discrimination, whether it be because she was a Black woman initially working in Utah, where she was experiencing discrimination, or when she got to becoming one of the Homeland Security's first chief information officers, and she was being discriminated against because she was a woman and she was Black. And what she found was every single time they tried to knock her down, and she was able to find a way to get around it, over it, under it, whatever it may be, it provided her the story, the internal story that when something else happened, oh, no. I already overcame something like this before. I can do this. And actually, this is what I love to work with my clients on and whatnot is I tell them literally, your listeners can do this. Look, take some time right now, push pause and write down 5 of the most difficult things, the most hard times you've had in your life. Write them down, right? Okay, you wrote them down. Now I want you to do this right here. I want you to look at those things and I want you to look at that paper. Now look at yourself, right? You're still here. You're not dead. What does that mean? That means that you are strong enough to overcome whatever comes your way. I am not a flowery guy. I'm not a gumdrops and rainbows person. It's not about hope. This is data. You identified yourself that these are 5 of the most difficult and painful and hard times in your life. And yet you are here today. That means that you can overcome these things. In the same way what she did with dealing with discrimination, you can overcome the challenges that come in your life because you've shown that you can do it. It's evidence-based. It's facts. And I believe in you and you should believe in you.
That's a huge example. That's in the book or in one of the courses?
That's in the book.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that one is worth looking at. But to be fair here, right? This is pull yourself up, look at the things that you can do. But this is not to say that discrimination doesn't exist, Alex. Okay.
I look here, I'll be real with you. Look, I was asked the other day about tokenism. It's like, Alex, can you do a training on tokenism? I said, you know what? I can do it. I've spoken on tokenism. But here's the thing. I don't have the benefit of living in this fairy tale world where I don't have to deal with tokenism. That is a fact. I've been in positions because I was the token Black guy or the token young person. I've been to those situations. I promise you, I will be in more situations when I am the token. I don't have the luxury to act like that's not going to happen. So now that I know that I'm going to be experiencing discrimination, my question becomes, how do I develop the skills, the strategies, the know-how to overcome each one of those discriminations that come? See, because I don't care if someone likes me or not. What I'm going to do, I'm going to be successful. Regardless of who likes me or what, I'm going to make sure that my family is taken care of. So I'm not worried about, I work with organizations to help them build cultures that are more inclusive, to help them reduce the discrimination, so on and so forth. But I also teach my individual leaders, you also can't wait for an organization to do that. You got to make sure that you can overcome it regardless.
Yeah. Yeah. As the economists say, in the long run, we're all dead. So it's time to do things here and now. Alex, this has been a tremendous conversation. I'm sure there is one question I should have asked that I did not. You are amazing at asking questions. What should I have asked? And go ahead and answer it.
Oh, man. What should you be asking? You've asked really, really good questions. The first thing that comes to mind for me is, what is the hardest thing you've ever had to do? And for me, the hardest thing I've ever had to do was face the reality that someone who I knew was in my corner, tried to undermine me and my career. And because I was so close to that person, they didn't only know about me professionally, they knew about me personally. They knew I had outside endeavors. They knew I had a wife and a family I was taking care of. And yet, because their political ambitions ran counter to mine, they were willing to hurt me. And that was the most difficult part in my career, I believe. Very stressful time.
And how did you overcome that?
I would say twofold. The first is I had to realize actually that work wasn't life. I tend to work really hard. And I started really spending a lot of time with my wife. And I can tell, this is one thing you got to do. If you want to be successful, again, you don't do this alone. You need to have a support group, because something tough, bad, hard is going to come your way. And you need to have someone who can be there for you, to talk to you when things go wrong, or just to listen when things go wrong. My wife and I dealt with this for over almost 2 years, dealing with this person. And having her around just to be there with me really kept me sane. So that's one side. The other side is, this is when I went and spoke to, I saw the director of the National Park Service speaking at an event. And I walked up to him and I said, hey, sir, I really appreciated your talk. I'm really interested in some of the work that you're doing. I'd love to meet with you and talk more about this. And he said, sure. And when I met with him a month later, within 15 minutes of talking with him, he offered me a job. I say it to say, when things are going rough, you can't just sit there either. You got to make moves. You got to try something. You got to keep reaching out. If you just sit there and take it, I can promise you one thing. It's going to keep going. Like if someone's trying to hurt you or harm you, it's not just going to stop. So you need to either find a way to get away from there, or you need to find political allies to try to make that person stop. But that's also political savvy.
That is also political savvy. And I like what you said there about having the support network around you as well. Alex, thank you so much for your time. It sounds like you do have a lot of new initiatives going on with your new book. What's the best way for people to reach you, and what should they be looking at if they want to experience your work or your training or your speaking?
Well, the first thing they should do is visit alextremble.com. That's ALEXTREMBLE.com. alextremble.com. From there, you can learn about my speaking, you can learn about my online courses. There's a lot of actually really great free resources as well. I actually literally created a script. If you want to have professional development conversations with your supervisor or even with your reportees, go to alextremble.com. You sign up for my newsletter, you get access to that. I literally worked on this for about a year with leaders from multiple sectors on how to develop a script so you know exactly what to say to either your employees or your supervisor when you're trying to fight for resources and time and effort to develop yourself.
Awesome. Well, doing great stuff, Alex. Thank you again for joining me today.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for listening to 97% Effective, where we skip happy talk and help you break through and ascend one hard truth at a time. Help others discover this show. Leave a review and rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you like what you heard, you can get free resources, including the first chapters of Michael's book, Get Promoted, on his website, www.changwenderoth.com. That's www.changwenderoth.com.